Brethren, welcome back to the Master Craftsman Philosophy Study Group. We are excited to jump back in. We are officially into the really nitty-gritty of the Scottish Rite ritual itself that we're all going to be more used to, beginning with the Lodge of Perfection in the 4th degree. We are in Section 2. This is quizzes 5 and 6. So if that's where you're participating, again, you want to have read the material before you advance any further. We're beginning today with the 4th degree Secret Master, and that's going to begin on page 183. We're excited to have you along for this ride. Let's dive in and get going. So, brethren, here we go. Let's get rocking and rolling as we dive into the Lodge of Perfection. Now, the Lodge of Perfection is composed of the 4th through 14th degrees. Gonna get us kicked off really in the work that most of us are very interested in. The first 3 degrees, the craft degrees, the Scottish Rite, very interesting in their own right. But for those, we really probably haven't, most of us haven't experienced those in person, at least in the Scottish Rite lens. So when we talk about a lot of those things, especially in the lectures, perhaps there's some disjointed connection there. Now we're going to be hitting stuff that you've hopefully seen some of these degrees. Before we go any further, it is important. In the Lodge of Perfection, we are going to talk about the Elu, and I'm going to ask for your forgiveness, because likely at some point I'm going to say Elu, but it is the Elu principle. Elu means elect, and I've had this discussion with brothers before. When do we become Elu? Really, well, we talk about it in these degrees specifically, but you become an Elu once you enter the lodge and you're initiated, because you're elected to become part of that lodge. You are selected to be set apart, to leave the profane world and join the craft. And it's important we acknowledge that. On the same side of that, we need to remember, and this is something I didn't address in the Master Mason discussion, but it's worth addressing now, that the Scottish Rite craft degrees differ, at least in the Master Mason degree, than the Preston Webb ritual. In the Preston Webb ritual, the Tyrians are addressed and dealt with in the Master Mason degree. In the Scottish Rite ritual, they escape, and they are not, as is pretty frequently understood, at least in the Webb work at surface value. There's not a lot of depth given to the Tyrians, to the assassins, the ruffians, however you want to call them. Not a lot of depth. Yet, there is quite a bit of depth given to them in the Scottish Rite and symbolism, and they represent virtues, negative virtues or vices, if you will, negative aspects of man that are with us. And even though they disappear in the 3rd degree, we are going to see them again, but they're haunting us. They're in the background, just as many of our own negative aspects are haunting us in one way or another, in the background at all times. And the journey that we're going to take on as we go through the Lodge of Perfection and towards perfect Elu is to discover the inner work which we need to do on ourselves to solidify our own virtues, our own temple, if you will, so that we can advance towards some of the more real challenges that will manifest themselves through the chapter Rose Croix, through the Council of Kadosh, and into the consistory. So, within that scope, the ruffians do, of course, have some background play and where they're hiding. In the 4th degree and the 5th degree, those are the ones we're tackling today. The mystery of our own individual being has not yet been revealed to us. We're still just very, very basic here. And we're inadequate in understanding our own ignorance, our own issues, our passions, our prejudices, our self-motivations, and our lazy approaches to learning are still lingering there. And we need to purify ourselves of those to move forward. In the 5th degree, the Tyrians are going to come into play as our own interest in our idleness and selfishness, our non-committal approach towards others and their welfare, our unlearned privileges, and our own self-serving motivations, which I think if you think about that and what that degree is about, it'll kind of fire on all cylinders for you. The quest to the Lodge of Perfection is about that self-discovery. It's about formally building that temple strengthening it, giving it those virtues and foundations, coming into control of those ruffians, and moving forward. And of course, the lodge room represents to us the world, the universe. Our journey through it in these degrees is representative of life. And the craft work in this ritual is going to prepare us to address those ruffians later on, and move us towards our pursuit of perfect truth, and discover where it is deep down in us. The Lodge of Perfection is going to push us to understand our own manhood, understand our own abilities. We're going to be strengthened and awoken to our charges, our real base duties by the end of this. And it's going to facilitate a path, giving us some tools that allow us to move forward. So, with that being said, we jump now into Secret Master, the 4th degree. Woe unto those who aspire for that which they are unfitted. Woe unto those who take up a burden they cannot bear. Woe unto those who assume duties lightly and afterwards neglect them. The 4th degree addresses the loss of the master, which is symbolizing, of course, our loss of the true word. In consideration as well as the interplay of light and dark, good and evil, truth and error. The degree itself, at least in various places, will tell you there's no allegory or specific storyline, but it's an interaction. It's a basis of instruction and interplay that is involved. You enter into a council of princes of Jerusalem. They're in mourning. The walls are strewn in black with silver tears. It's a very sad place. And the candidate is received in darkness, and he goes through several processes wherein he's explained the duties of a secret master: silence, obedience, fidelity. He learns that duty teaches us to work for work's sake without hope of reward or praise. And he's given and he's armed with the 9 great Masonic virtues: independence, truthfulness, endurance, equity, justice, mercy, silence, devotion, attainment. He's given these and he's armed with these and he's sent forth. I like to tell brothers, this is kind of the baseline locking you in degree. It's reminding you about secrecy. It's reminding you about obedience. It's reminding you of tie to your brothers. You're given these basic virtues to follow forward with. You're entering a point of sadness because not only is the master slain, but the world is in darkness. When light is extinguished, when ignorance and fanaticism and anger and envy and all these bad things overtake good, and we have to rebuild it, and we're calling on you to do that. So let's dig into Morals and Dogma specifically, though. Masonry is a succession of allegories, the mere vehicle of great lessons in morality and philosophy. You will more appreciate its spirit, its object, its purposes as you advance in the different degrees, which you will find constitute a great, complete, and harmonious system. And that's our starting little bit of commentary right there from the text. If you have been disappointed in the first 3 degrees as you have received them, and if you seemed that the performance was not up to the promise, that the lessons of morality were not new, the instruction rudimentary, and the symbols imperfectly explained, remember that the ceremonies and the lessons of those degrees have been for ages more and more accommodating them by curtailment and sinking to commonplace and the limited memory and the capacity of the master and instructor. To the intellect, the needs of the pupil and the initiate, they have come to us from an age when symbols were used, not to reveal, but to conceal, when the commonest learning was confined to a select few. And so Pike begins very clearly saying, if you were disappointed by the first 3 degrees, I get it. It makes sense. And he begins to talk about the fact that our rituals were created to conceal and not really to reveal information. And that they were created with one learned group in mind. Yet over time, the master or the initiate, based on their own knowledge and skill set, things had to be, quote unquote, if you will, dumbed down in a way. Knowledge had to be curtailed and shifted away from perhaps what we might be more familiar with in terms of a greater level of thinking. You are in the path that leads up the slope of the mountain of truth. It depends upon your secrecy, obedience, and fidelity. whether you advance or remain stationary. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing to put. It's up to you whether you want to stay where you're at or move forward. He who desires to understand the harmonious and beautiful proportions of Freemasonry must read, study, reflect, digest, and discriminate. The true Mason is an ardent seeker of knowledge. This is one of my favorite quotes out of the text. An ardent seeker of knowledge, and he knows both books and antique symbols of Masonry are vessels that come to us full freighted with intellectual riches of the past. And that is in the lading of these argosies, it sheds much light on the history of Masonry, and it proves its claim to be acknowledged as the benefactor of mankind born in the very cradle of the race. Knowledge, of course, my brothers, this idea of pursuing truth, we realize that our lessons are extremely old. They're weighted, our symbols carrying many layers, many levels, and they're all interconnected over time, and they come down to us with these layers of symbols. And realizing that, understanding that we have to apply ourselves to dig through an important aspect here. Of course, knowledge is the most genuine and real of human treasures, for it is light, as ignorance is darkness. It is the development of the human soul, the acquisition and growth of the soul, which pushes us onward. We can see how far the monuments of genius and learning are more durable than the monuments of power or the hands. For have not the verses of Homer continued 2,500 years or more without loss of a syllable or letter, during which time palaces, temples, castles, cities have decayed and been demolished? Is it not possible to have true pictures or statues of Cyrus, Alexander, Caesar, great kings and persons of later years? For the originals cannot last, and the copies cannot but be lost to life and truth. But the image of men's genius, their knowledge remains in books exempted from the rungs of time and the capable in perpetual renovation. To learn, to attain knowledge, to be wise is the necessity of every true noble soul. To teach, to communicate that knowledge, to share that wisdom with others, and not curiously, is to lock up the exchequer and place a sentinel on the door to drive away the needy. And it's equally an impulsive of a noble nature and the worthiest work of men. To attain truth, and to serve our fellows and our country and mankind, this is the noblest destiny of men. This is the noblest destiny of men. Hereafter, and all your life is but to be your object. If you desire to ascend to that destiny, advance. If you have other and less noble objects and are contented with lower flight, halt here. Halt here. Realize that secrecy is indispensable for a Mason, no matter the law, and no matter its understanding. And it's the first and it's the only lesson taught to an entered apprentice, the obligation of which every master mason is assumed. The secrets of our brothers, when communicated to us, must be kept sacred, if they are to be such that the laws of our country warrant us to keep it. We are required to keep none other when the law that we are called to obey is indeed the law, by having emanated from the only source of power, the people. Of course, our obedience to the law is important as well, in that sense. And in this degree, my brother, you are especially to learn the importance of that obedience to law, because there is only one true and original law, conformable to reason and to nature, diffused over all, invariable, eternal, and it calls for the fulfillment of duty and the abstinence from injustice. It calls for the irresistible voice which is fell in all its authority wherever heard. This law cannot be abridged or diminished. It is that fulfillment of duty. It is that service of the divine in its placement. It is not enough that the consciousness be taught by nature, but it must be taught by God, conducted by reason, and made operative by discourse, assisted by choice, and instructed by laws and sober principles. Then it is right, and then you may be sure. Yet we are told and we are charged in this degree that we must be faithful. We must be faithful. Be faithful, therefore, to the promises you make, to the pledges you give, to the vows you assume, since if you break either, it is base and dishonorable. Be faithful to your family and perform your duties as a good father, son, husband, brother. Be faithful to your friends, for true friendship is of the nature not only to survive through all vicissitudes of life, but to continue through an endless duration. Be faithful to your country and prefer its dignity and honor to any degree of popularity and honor for yourself. Be faithful to masonry, which is faithful to the best interest of mankind. Labor by precept and example to elevate its standards of its character, to enlarge its sphere of influence, to populate its teachings, and to make all men know that it is the great apostle of peace, harmony, and goodwill. Masonry, of course, is useful to all men. The learned, because it affords the opportunity of exercising their talents upon subjects eminently worthy of their attention. To the illiterate, because it offers them important instruction. To the young, because it presents them with salutary precepts and good examples, and accustoms them to reflect on the proper mode of living. To the man of the world, whom it furnishes noble and useful recreation. To the traveler, who it enables to find friends and brothers in countries where he may have been isolated or solitary. To the worthy man in misfortune, to whom it gives assistance. To the afflicted, whom it lavishes consolation. To the charitable, whom it enables to do more good by uniting those who are charitable with him. And to all whose souls are capable of appreciating the importance and enjoying the charms of friendship found in the same principles of religion, morality, and philanthropy. A Freemason should be a man of honor and conscience, preferring his duty to everything, beside even to his life. Thus you will be faithful to yourself, to your fellows, and to your God, and thus you will do honor to the name and rank of Secret Master, which, like Masonic honors, degrades if it is not deserved. Some things to consider in this text. Consider what ways Masonry is said to be useful to all men. Masonry, of course, has a history, a literature, a philosophy. What does this image teach? We're told that Masonry is a succession of allegories, a meal vehicle of great objects, morality, and philosophy. What does that mean to you? How do you find that in your own understanding? How do you consider that? We are told a couple little other commentary pieces, and you saw some of that information on your screen that was not directly addressed as I was going through notes, and I'll hit on it now. We are told, of course, in old rituals that there was an urn and the candidates would behold it. It was a stately object said to contain their own intellectual treasures, their moral existence, their mind. And it sits right in front of us, waiting for us to choose to seek it. Here I'm reminded of the monitorial line that, like the light you bear, which you cannot see, truth and the lost word, which are light, are within the reach of every man that lives. Would he but open his eyes. My brothers, this concludes our overview of the fourth degree. We hope you were able to enjoy just that quick, brief overview as we cover the material. Again, always make sure you're doing the reading before we're getting to it, as we're only going to highlight some of those key points and press onward. This was the material for the fourth degree, or the fifth quiz in the second section of Master Craftsman Philosophy. Brethren, remember, Masonic education matters. We'll see you next time.